el único medio en español que te mantiene informado y conectado con la comunidad latina en Israel. News 24, únicamente en I24 News.
Welcome, you're watching I24 News, coming to you live from Tel Aviv. The top stories this hour. The top American general for the Middle East arrives in Israel amid reports of an imminent strike by Iran. The UN Security Council notes Israel's efforts to increase humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip, but says more must still be done. And has Indonesia replaced Saudi Arabia as the country next in line to sign up for normalization with Israel? First, Iran says it wouldn't have to retaliate against Israel if the UN Security Council had condemned a strike on Damascus last week. Israel is braced for what the US says could be an imminent attack from Iran. The US President Joe Biden says Washington will defend Israel, and the senior US military commander for the Middle East, General Kurilla, is in Israel tonight. Our Middle East correspondent Ariel Osseran has the latest.
Tensions over an expected Iranian retaliation against Israel are soaring, and Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is throwing his own threats into the mix.
We are in challenging times. We are in the middle of the war in Gaza, which continues in full force. At the same time, we continue our non-stop efforts to return our hostages, but we are also preparing for scenarios of challenges from other arenas. We established a simple principle: whoever hurts us, we hurt them.
Netanyahu's statement at an Air Force base comes as U.S. intelligence reportedly warned Israel of an imminent Iranian attack. Tehran has vowed to retaliate for an alleged Israeli airstrike last week on its Damascus embassy complex, which killed a top IRGC general and 6 other Iranian officers. The top U.S. military commander for the Middle East, CENTCOM Chief General Michael Kurilla, arrived in Israel on Thursday to coordinate a joint response, while President Biden's Middle East envoy urged regional diplomats to pressure Iran to avoid escalating the situation.
We also want to address the Iranian threat to launch they're threatening to launch a significant attack on Israel. As I told Prime Minister Netanyahu, our commitment to Israel's security against these threats from Iran and its proxies is ironclad. Let me say it again, ironclad. We're going to do all we can to protect Israel's security.
Meanwhile, fear over rising tensions in the region are felt elsewhere, with German airline Lufthansa suspending flights to and from Tehran due to, quote, the current situation in the Middle East. And the Kremlin has advised Russians against travel to the region.
Что мы судили, конечно же, удары по консульству Ирана. Сами удары мы осудили весьма жестко. Это нарушение всех принципов международного права. Сейчас же очень важно всем сохранять сдержанность с тем, чтобы не привести к полной дестабилизации обстановки в регионе, который и так не блещет стабильностью и предсказуемостью.
In the meantime, an Iranian news agency reported late Wednesday that the airspace over Tehran was closed for military drills, but then retracted the report and denied its publication. And with the entire Middle East on high alert, the slightest step can add further fuel to the fire.
Well, with me in the studio this hour, Danny Ayalon is the former Israeli ambassador to the United States and the former Israeli deputy foreign minister. Good to see you, Danny. Thanks for being with us. And Yakov Fain is military and strategic affairs analyst at the Miriam Institute, the Jewish News Syndicate, and the Alma Center. Welcome to you, Yakov, as well. Danny, I'll start with you, if I may. Are you satisfied, first of all, despite all the recent tensions between Washington and Jerusalem, that the US firmly has Israel's back when it comes to the threat of an attack?
Yes, absolutely. Nothing has really changed in terms of the friendship and the alliance, which is a natural alliance between Israel and the United States based on the values. Of course, the interests are the same. And the United States have been quite adept at making the distinction between the government of Israel and Netanyahu, which, you know, there's no lost love between the two governments, the administration and the government, and, of course, Israel itself. And here, certainly with Iran, the U.S. Would like to avoid a widening of the war. They have said it right from the start, on the 7th of October, with the don't and with sending the two aircraft carriers. Nothing has changed here. And with Iran, I think that it's just a precaution, and I don't think that Iran, when everybody is ready for a strike, this is the last time you want to really make a strike if you are a good strategist. I think the Iranians are enjoying the attention, and they're trying to put Israel on the spot here. I don't think that they will change their grand strategy of using proxies, of fighting until the last Yemenite or the last Lebanese or the last Palestinian. But, you know, we have to take all the necessary measures just in case.
All right, thank you. Yakov, it seems as though we've been waiting a long time for this Iranian retaliation. I think it's 10 days now. Just talk us through the various scenarios, what Israel is potentially preparing for.
Right. The Iranians are very patient, and they have a range of options that they can deploy to strike Israel. They can, from their own territory, in theory, very much launch barrages of cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, and swarms of UAVs of the type that the Iranians have provided to the Russians that are launching them at Ukrainian cities. UAVs like Shahed 136, which certainly put Israel in range from launch points in Iran. So they can do that from Iranian territory. They can also try to do that from lands which are under the control of their proxies, such as Syria, such as Lebanon, such as Iraq and Yemen. So they have those options, and the Iranians also have an international terrorism network that they have tried to activate in the past for these kinds of revenge attacks, and which the Mossad has been extremely successful at thwarting. And I would assume that behind the scenes there is a large-scale effort now by Israel's intelligence community to secure its overseas diplomatic assets and every other kind of asset imaginable, anything that could become a target. So we're really seeing the Israeli defense establishment and the Israeli state, both at home and abroad, go into readiness mode, highest possible readiness mode, both for absorbing and defending against an attack. And we've heard very clear statements about retaliation, that if an attack comes out of Iran, the response will be in Iran. So that has been put on the table, and we're seeing both Israel and the United States try and influence the decision-making of Iran. The Iranian Supreme National Council, which actually has the final say here, made up of, Ayatollah Khamenei's representatives and the IRGC. They are going to look for a way that to strike that is painful, but probably which will not lead to some sort of war. That's their goal, and I think they will take their time and look for their best option. Okay,
Yakov, now thank you very much. Well, the IDF is on high alert in the north, where it is already battling the Iranian proxy Hezbollah. Balir Sladin, our correspondent, joins us now from the north of Israel. So, Balir, is the IDF making any additional preparations in anticipation of some kind of attack from Iran via the northern border?
Well, I guess the Israeli military is absolutely on high alert and can be expanded further than this. We're seeing, of course, lots of Iron Dome on ready, as well as a Patriot air defense system, and of course, we are hearing lots of Israeli fighter jets in the air in preparation for any attack by any UAVs from Syria or Lebanon by Iran or Iranian proxies in both countries. So the Israeli military is on high alert as we see it. But on the ground, Benita, we are talking about some sort of calm here, very quiet, recently strangely quiet. Hezbollah just now announced that they have attacked Israel in what they call Mawqa' Bayad Bleda, which is in Upper Galil. Hezbollah is for the first time today only is taking responsibility for an attack against Israeli sites in the northern border. We haven't heard the sirens go off today since this morning, and that's after also yesterday only one siren was heard in Kiryat Shmona as a result of rocket that was fired, one rocket from southern Lebanon. It was intercepted by the Iron Dome. So of course this could be the calm before the storm, but currently we're not seeing any escalation here in this front. Everyone's expecting some sort of revenge or response from Iran. And by the way, Yedoat Ahronot, which is an Israeli media, is citing right now sources that are saying that Iran has actually delayed its attack against Israel in the last minute, and that's happening after the American pressure against Iran in the recent couple of days, because the Americans, through their diplomatic tunnels and also through the public statements that we have heard from Blinken, from Biden as well, they are saying that they will respond, or they might even respond to Iran with Israel. And also, of course, they are ready to defend Israel against any Iranian threat or Iranian attack, of course, through the air defense systems that we have here in the Middle East by the United States and in general. So this could be some sort of like delaying this Iranian attack until now, but it is, of course, coming at some point.
Balir, thank you very much. Balir Sladin there in the north of Israel. Well, let's get the Iranian perspective. We're joined by Camelia Entekabi-Fard. She's the editor-in-chief of the Independent Persian. Great to see you, Camelia. Thank you for being with us. First of all, what do you make of those comments by Iran's representative to the UN saying, look, if the UN had just done its job and condemned the strike on Damascus, we wouldn't have to retaliate? Do you think they're looking for a way out without losing face?
Thank you very much, Laura, for the greetings. And what a night was for the Israelis and Iranians last night. A very difficult night for everyone. The messages to the United Nations might be, it just give us a little bit relief of this very high tension that has been rose in the region in the past 24 hours ago. I believe that the Islamic Republic, through its diplomatic channel, told all regional countries that they should expect Iranian retaliation attacking some of the Israeli interests last night. I'm telling that based on the telephone conversation Iran foreign minister had with his own other foreign minister of Qatar, Iraq, UAE, and Saudi Arabia. And also the Amir Abdullahian said he passed a message to the Switzerland embassy in Tehran, to the Americans. I believe that wouldn't be conducting a blind attack. They were informed, the regional countries and also the United States, and perhaps Israelis knows well through these channels that exactly where and how Iranian wants to conduct they launch their attack. Since they haven't happened yesterday, we don't know behind the scene what kind of diplomacy was taking place. Maybe the United Nations put the steps towards this situation, as what you said and we heard today. Maybe there wouldn't be an impossible this attack, as Iran said the UN messages would be comforting them.
Camelia, do you think that the Iranians have been put off by the strong show of support from the United States? And are they concerned that the war is coming ever closer to its doorstep?
Yes, it can be. And I believe that they understand this time the United States might be taking an action against of the Islamic Republic if Iran attacked Israel. But I have to say that last night I didn't thought that would be a direct attack inside of the Israeli soil. As I was seeing and I was assuming that could be in the same level of the Israelis' interest in different countries. That was my opinion, to have the same scale and the same level of the Israeli attack Iranian consulate in Syria. And I believe that Iranians make themselves ready for the American and Israeli responses in case if they attack Iranian territory inside of the country and attack, for example, Iranian nuclear facilities, to have their plan B. And still the tension is very high, and I believe more than ever we could see this tension is very serious, and still the Iranian regimes are not coming down. They are waiting to see what the other players taking position regards of the situation.
Right, there's a great deal of pressure on Iran right now, isn't there? The whole world is watching. What happens if Tehran simply does not respond to Israel? Does it risk losing the support of Arab groups across the region?
It's not only about the Arab groups, also their own supporters inside the country. Their credibility among of the supporters would be damaged. But we had these things happen before too, and they decided to wouldn't respond, or they would have this patience for the another time to get this retaliation. Maybe that would be a set of their proxies all launching attack at the same times, not directly the Islamic Republic gets engaged, but still I am seeing that possibilities because of their own credibilities. Khamenei yesterday at the Friday at the Eid prayer times, he said directly that this attack in the Consulate General in Syria was an attack to the Iranian soil and territory, which means he is telling his forces that they have to be retaliate of the Israelis, unless, as I said, everything is possible. The Arab countries, the Arab nations make amendings and diplomatic channel. It would make Iranian at this time to not taking an action against of the Israelis. It's possible.
Camelia Entekabifad, Editor-in-Chief at the Independent Persian, thank you very much indeed. We appreciate it. Thanks. Well, meanwhile, US officials say that they fear most of the hostages who are still being held in Gaza could already be dead. That's according to a report in the Wall Street Journal. It comes as talks continue in Cairo, with Hamas yet to respond to the latest offer from Israel and the United States. Meanwhile, the IDF has launched an offensive in Nuseirat in central Gaza. We can get the latest on that now with our correspondent, Zach Anders, who's down in the south of Israel. Zach, what's happening?
Well, behind me, you'll see Gaza City. Over my left shoulder, we've seen repeated strikes in one particular area. Can't say for certain if these strikes in the last hour and a half have all been at the same location, but Palestinian media reports that these strikes inside Gaza City have been happening near the Baptist Hospital. And we, through our camera lens, have been able to see these strikes in a very close proximity to each other, very well spaced out, about a half hour each apart, but on the eastern half of Gaza City. Yesterday's activity was primarily focused in the south, well, really in the central part of the Gaza Strip, but south of Gaza City. So we've been watching a tremendous amount of activity last night, a bit quieter there today, but we're seeing these strikes again inside Gaza City. And I think that's the contrast between last night and tonight. Yesterday's strike inside Gaza City was the one that captured everyone's attention as the killing of Ismail Haniyeh's sons. But again, the majority of military activity we saw, the airstrikes that we saw, were happening in the south of Gaza City. So today, I've seen a fair number, a few, but again, the largest strikes appear to be, once again, in Gaza City.
And Zach, are we looking at more limited operations in different parts of the Strip all at once, rather than big operations in one concentrated area?
That's my question as well. And right now, the IDF has not been speaking with a very pointed language as to what this activity looks like right now since the withdrawal. We have more questions than we do answers at this stage, because we see the remaining brigade in the central area of the Gaza Strip. This is the area that the IDF has the greatest control. It's split Gaza in two now. and they control this corridor. And we've seen some of the aid workers. Some of them have described what this looks like now. They'll go through checkpoints, and they have to have approval to be able to move from south to north with some of these trucks. Now, we still are seeing a good amount of aid that has met this corridor, and the trucks that have been flowing through. The IDF and Kogat has been saying that a record-breaking number of trucks have been moving in through the southern entry points, and some of those trucks have been moving north. We're seeing that as well, so that does appear to be accurate. But the military activity, why we're seeing so many airstrikes in the central area of the Gaza Strip while the IDF has a heavy presence there, is one of those questions we're working to try and understand better.
Zach, thank you very much. Zach Andrews there in the south of Israel. Yakov Lapin and Danny Ayalon, Ambassador Ayalon, with me in the studio this hour. And Danny, just on the hostages, this new report, US officials believe that most of the hostages may now be dead. Hamas said earlier in the week, of course, it couldn't get together 40 hostages that met the criteria, women, sick and the elderly. I mean, now this report, is there anything Israel can do differently to get the hostages back?
I'm not sure. I mean, in hindsight, I don't think anything would have mattered. You know, the military pressure, of course, the diplomatic pressure. Unfortunately, Qatar, Egypt did not deliver. The United States put a lot of pressure on these two countries. And it could be very well the truth that many of them have passed away, and it wouldn't be surprising, you know, in these conditions, underground, with no air light, probably with hardly any food, with pollution. You have their elderly people, you have their young people, and some people were wounded, of course, without all those with chronic ailments, without their needed drugs. The question is, why would the U.S. release such a statement now? And that could be maybe as part of a pressure on Hamas to bring down the price, because so far Hamas has not relented, and Israel did accept the latest offer on the table that the United States put, and maybe this is a pressure on Hamas to show that, well, it's unfortunate as it is, you don't have the cards you think you do.
And pressure perhaps on Qatar as well.
Also.
Yakov, I want to ask you about what we're seeing in Gaza now, because there has been some confusion here in Israel about what's happening after the withdrawal from Khan Yunis, and now we hear about an uptick in strikes last night. What is going on? Are we looking at a new stage in the military campaign now?
I think the new stage is actually has been underway for weeks, and in some places in Gaza actually months, and that is stage 3 of this war, which the IDF has been talking about since the beginning of the war. If stage 1 were the heavy airstrikes, stage 2 was the ground offensive, stage 3 is targeted operations. I'm not including Rafah in this story of stage 3, but the rest of Gaza is essentially subject to targeted military operations backed by air power. There are a couple of Hamas battalions, not very well functioning, but in existence in central Gaza, in Nuseirat and Deir al-Balach, these areas that are now seem to be the focus of these strikes. But we're not seeing what we saw earlier during stage 2, which is a division going in with lots and lots of brigades in it. Now they're sending small forces backed by air power, conducting these strikes and then moving away. And this is what stage 3 will look like for most of Gaza. And this is essentially what I think not only the coming months will look like, but actually years. It will take years to fully eliminate Hamas as a military threat and to make sure that it does not regroup, reemerge. And I think this is the beginning of a pattern that's going to last for a very, very long time.
Okay, thank you both. Well, aid has been a key source of pressure on Israel throughout this campaign. The UN Security Council has acknowledged Israel's efforts to get more aid in Gaza. It says it still wants more to be done, though. Earlier, the IDF released a video about the next phase of humanitarian operations in the Gaza Strip. Take a listen to the IDF spokesman now.
We are constructing the northern crossing, a new land crossing from Israel into northern Gaza, to enable more aid to flow directly to civilians in the areas that have been challenging for the trucks to access. These new measures enable us to bring more aid and trucks destined for Gaza from overseas, including the via land crossing with Jordan, where we expect 50 8 trucks a day to pass through.
Well, the UK and Jordan have been working together to deliver humanitarian aid to Gaza. The two countries have strong historical ties. The UK, of course, helped install the Hashemite monarchy. Jordan also has a large Palestinian population, and thousands have been taking to the streets in recent weeks, calling on the king to tear up a peace agreement with Israel over the war with Hamas. Dr Nasia Alamari is an independent writer and political commentator. He joins us now. Great to see you, Nasir. It's important, isn't it, for both countries to show that they are doing their bit to ease the civilian suffering in Gaza. Is the message getting through, though, in Jordan?
Jordanians, it is getting through. Some Jordanians feel like Jordan really can do more than what it's doing or what the king is doing, and that is to aid the Palestinians. However, there are other Jordanians who believe that the king is really not doing anything because he condemned Hamas and he has, of course, called to end the war like everybody else. But he recalled the Jordanian ambassador from Israel and he asked the Israeli ambassador to leave. But that is not enough. Some people in Jordan believe that Jordan is in a unique position because probably half or more than half of the population are of Palestinian origins, and they feel like the king really has not done anything other than condemning the attacks against the Palestinians. So the king has been going around, visiting the tribes, saying, let's keep our country. In other words, he's saying, we don't want to get dragged into this. Let's stay out of it. However, with this war continuing at this rate, Jordan becomes a target for those who want to destabilize Jordan, like Iran and Hamas and others who believe that Jordan can actually change the equation if it becomes engrossed in this war.
Is there a risk of that happening, Nasir, and could the UK help stabilize Jordan?
I don't see a direct risk, especially with all this talk of ending the war. But, escalation is a serious problem for Jordan. And now there are reports that Iran has already has been working in Jordan and smuggling weapons from Syria and Iraq through Jordan to the West Bank. So with the continued conflict, I think Jordan might become destabilized. Additionally, the economy is a serious problem. If the economic situation in Gaza and the West Bank is disastrous, it's probably also more as disastrous in Jordan. So Jordan is definitely a target of Hamas and Iran, and a target of its own bad and deteriorating economy. So definitely the UK is being strategic in talking about Jordan and making sure that it remains a stable island in this, violent region.
Dr Nasia Alamari, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having me.
Time for a short break. When we come back, civilians in both Iran and Israel are braced for an escalation as their leaders trade increasingly harsh rhetoric. Up next, I'll be speaking to an Iranian dissident and campaigner. Stay tuned.
Israel is in a state of war.
Families completely gunned down in their beds. We have no idea where is she.
As our soldiers are fighting on the front lines, but the general perception is something that certainly needs to be fought as well.
Esta semana en News 24, Israel bajo ataque. News 24 en español trae el análisis y la información de los acontecimientos de la guerra Espadas de Hierro.
Entrevistas exclusivas, reportes desde la zona de guerra, la reacción de los países hispanoparlantes.
News 24, el único medio en español que te mantiene informado y conectado con la comunidad latina en Israel. News 24 únicamente en I24 News.
Welcome back. Well, as Israel braces for a response from Iran over the killing of a senior IRGC commander in Damascus last week, many people inside Iran are also worried about the prospect of war. There has been a ramping up of the rhetoric from both Israeli and Iranian leaders in the last few days. Well, I'm delighted to welcome to the studio Iranian human rights activist and women's rights advocate Lilia Jamali, also known as Lily Moo. Is that right? Welcome, Lily.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for having me, especially during these very sensitive times.
It was a tense night, wasn't it? We were seeing on all the Telegram channels, 1:20 in the morning, that's when Iran is going to attack Israel. I mean, you've seen both sides. I mean, you're here in Israel. You've seen how anxious Israeli civilians are, and I'm sure you know
Absolutely.
also that Iranian civilians are feeling the same.
Yes, Iranians in Iran, the civilians definitely do not want any conflict between Iran and Israel, but as we all know, Iranians are held hostage by the regime that is constantly causing a lot of havoc and terrorism in the region through their proxies or through their mental war that they incite on their own citizens and the citizens in the region. Israel and Iran are one and the same in so many ways. People have been isolating us in our time of need for one another, for humanity. I mean, over the past 6 months, we have seen how the horrific attacks against the nation and the people, the women and the body of Israel was so easily ignored and championed on other sides in so many ways. And Iranians were,
people were
in
shocked.
So many ways, not only shocked, in the very same attack happened in Iran for 3 days in November of 2019. And the world just brushed it off because the Islamic Republic is very good at hiding its violations, but it promotes and advertises its proxies violations as some sort of trophy, just to show that, you know, it's not us, it's them, but everybody gets trained in the camp of Khamenei and the IRGC. So people of Iran don't want war with Israel. They are afraid. They are petrified of what is going on. And the anxiety that I see here amongst this incredible nation here who only want peace is heartbreaking.
Right, because I've seen pictures from inside Tehran and other cities where presumably the regime have put up murals and posters, a ticking clock counting down to Israel's destruction. It seems they really want to whip up public hatred, but it doesn't seem to be working.
The thing is, when the mullahs try to attempt a PR campaign, it's only going to be a circus, and sadly we've seen it unfold day in, day out in Iran, as if our incredible and intellectual people are incapable of understanding that their parody of reality is not in tune with the rest of the world nor the nation of Iran. So it's a circus for their own entertainment and ego boost in every way possible.
Of course, prior to October 7th, there was a major uprising in Iran, unprecedented numbers of people coming out on the streets to protest over the killing of Mahsa Amini, a young Kurdish woman.
That's right.
How is the regional escalation that we're seeing now affecting the protest movement?
The protest movement in Iran hasn't ended. It hasn't stopped because we still have all of our prisoners in prison. We have hundreds of thousands of Iranians kidnapped into unknown custodies, and the international community has no idea about it. We have the biggest violators of human rights and women's rights as chosen as the head of the Human Rights Security Council for the UN. So what we are witnessing right now is a big cover-up over the revolution that is currently alive and happening in Iran against the Islamic Republic. But what we are seeing right now is terrible figures in the West championing the Islamic Republic, and their betrayal of humanity will not be forgotten by the people of Iran and the people of the Middle East.
Yeah, I mean, there's a famous clip from the protests in London. There have been huge anti-Israel rallies in London every single weekend since October 7th. And we have seen some Iranian dissidents, very brave people speaking out against the Iranian regime, who've been themselves arrested.
Yes.
But I think one guy holding a placard saying Hamas is a terrorist organization, which according to British law it is, he was arrested.
Right. Niak Qorbani, a good friend of mine, a dissident of Iran who has been fighting against the Islamic Republic since many, many years, but ever since the 2022 uprising, which we call a revolution. I really don't like the term uprising for it. It does minimize the effort and the act itself, and the prisoners, the number of prisoners, the number of people dead. Anyhow, Niak has been active against the Islamic Republic and has been calling out the terroristic activities of Hamas since day one. We've been in the streets of London together, and along with Niak, we have my other friend Shahab, and another friend named Hashem, another friend named oh my God, he's going to kill me. He's one of my very good friends as well, Shervin Savad Kuhi. And they are all risking their lives in London by calling out a terrorist group that has been placed as a terrorist in London, in the UK, by the British law. So it's a very unsafe scenario what we are witnessing in London, because propaganda is more important, is much more effective than the truth right now. And that this is a very, very, very dangerous time, because when we have tools that can magnify propaganda by folds of billions, when in the past it only took thousands to create a Hitler or a Khomeini, now we have it happen at folds of billions in everybody's hands.
And the Iranian regime seemed very skilled at propaganda.
Absolutely. They learned it from Hitler and the Soviets very well, and they are executing that right now.
Okay, wow. Great to talk to you. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your stay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Israel-Chai, Payanda Iran. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Toda. Okay, well, prior to the war with Hamas, everyone was expecting Saudi Arabia to be the next in line to sign up for normalization with Israel via the Abraham Accords. But in something of a plot twist, it appears Indonesia is ready to recognize Israel. The world's most populous Muslim country has been one of Israel's harshest critics, but it wants to join the OECD. That's the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. And for that, it needs OECD member Israel's blessing. Well, joining me for more on that, Asha Fredman is Director for Israel at the Abraham Accords Peace Institute and a Senior Fellow at the Misgav Institute for National Security. Good to see you, Asha. Thanks for joining us. And just when you thought the Abraham Accords had kind of hit a wall, we've got these reports now that Jakarta is ready to normalise. I don't think anyone saw that coming today.
Good evening, and it's great to be back with you. The Abraham Accords have continued on the strategic, diplomatic, and economic levels. On the people-to-people level, we've seen slowing down. Now, there was talk with Indonesia. There are numerous areas of cooperation with Indonesia stretching back decades, both in the security and the military sphere, but also in the water security and the innovation and the agricultural spheres. Indonesia was always on the radar. The news from this morning and various reports that we've been hearing over the last few weeks of a possibility for ties are certainly a welcome development.
If this does go ahead, Asha, wouldn't it just be purely transactional normalisation in exchange for OECD membership, or could we, over time, see it lead to some form of cooperation?
I think there's quite a lot of potential for cooperation. In fact, the recently elected president of Indonesia, Subianto, is someone who's known to have had contacts with Israelis over the years. Other members of the Indonesian leadership, Israelis are able to get visas and to travel to Indonesia. There's also other trends. There's a strong Islamist stream in Indonesia that opposes ties with Israel. But I think the potential, the OECD may be the trigger or the excuse or the immediate cause. but the potential for deeper cooperation certainly exists.
What about the jewel in the crown of normalization, Saudi Arabia? Are you still hopeful, as someone who's been watching and worked on the Abraham Accords for many years now, are you still hopeful the kingdom will sign on and recognize Israel?
I am hopeful. I think it may happen in stages. With the UAE and Bahrain and Morocco, the move from non-normalization to full normalization was relatively quick, from the making the ties public. With Saudi Arabia, we may see increased trade. We may see certain areas of Saudi Arabia where Israelis are more openly involved. We may see more open defense cooperation. It may happen step by step. Of course, an important factor will be the commitment and the involvement of the American administration, the current administration, whoever leads the next administration, and whether or not that administration tries to condition Saudi-Israel ties on conditions that are unacceptable to Israel with regards to the Palestinians, or whether, like the Abraham Accords, it takes the approach of win-win mutual cooperation and war and peace for its own sake.
Asha Fredman, thank you very much. Great to talk to you.
Great to talk to you too. Thank you.
And still with me in the studio this hour, Ambassador Danny Ayalon, former Israeli ambassador to the US, and Yakov Fain, a military and strategic affairs analyst. And just, Danny, first of all, in terms of diplomacy, it's been a terrible time for Israel, hasn't it? Historically, this is one of the times where the country has seemed more alone than ever. This Indonesian normalization, or reports that it may happen, some very rare good news.
Yeah, that may be changing the tide, but as you mentioned, it may be instrumental, it may be something that is transactional, but it doesn't matter. The reason is less important when it comes to diplomacy, because what's very important is I would say, the optics here. And certainly if we open, let's say, not even embassies, you can start with trade missions, increasing trade, of course, tourism. Indonesia is the largest Muslim country, although there is some currents of very, very radical Islam, but they are few, certainly not as much as they are in other countries. And I think that the silent majority is pretty much a very pacific people they are. And since 1993, when Yitzhak Rabin, coming back after the Oslo Accord were signed, the declaration of what was it called? Principles, Declaration of Principles on September 13th, 1993. On the way back from Washington to Jerusalem, he stopped in Jakarta to a very publicized visit. Since then, things were going up and down, but now it may be also because of the political need of Jakarta, that we may see a new impetus in the relations.
3 decades later, it might still happen. Yakov Fain, do you think that there have been some diplomatic shortcomings for Israel since October 7th, and do you think that has hindered the war with Hamas?
Look, when it comes to the international community, unfortunately, the international community, led by, a lot of the rhetoric coming out of the White House in recent weeks, has placed most of its pressure campaign on Israel. And I think that has been greatly encouraging for the Hamas leadership down there in the tunnels of Rafah, when they see that Israel is the subject of most of this pressure, is the subject of most of the negative treatment in the international community. Diplomatically, Israel is quite isolated, obviously, now, and that is something that I think is serving Hamas's interest. It gives them hope that they will be able to pressure Israel via its Western allies, essentially to end the war. And that's Hamas's goal. Hamas's goal is to use a range of means, including diplomatic pressure, including the international media, including international legal forums, including the UN, all of it, to try and force Israel to end the war. And the more isolated Israel is in the world, the more Hamas will feel that it's closer to that goal. And we can only hope that Hamas's hopes are false. And so far they do appear to be false, but it's certainly an issue that Israel is going to have to deal with for a long time to come as part of the fallout of this war. All
right, Yakov Fain and Ambassador Danny Ayalon, thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.
Well, inside Saudi Arabia, meanwhile, there are signs that the pet projects of the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman have hit a bump in the road. The multi-billion-dollar Neom project has had to be scaled down. Let's get the details on that with our Dubai correspondent, Bastian B. So, Bastian, is Riyadh cutting down on this much-publicised Neom project, and if so, why?
Well, there are several factors working against the Saudi government at the moment. First, there's the viability of the project itself. We're talking about a 170-kilometer long, smart, linear, streetless city with a winter sports resorts in the desert, relying exclusively on renewable resources to increase Saudi Arabia's non-oil generated wealth. However, Riyadh has not been able to achieve much success in attracting financial resources and investment from both foreign governments and companies so far. There's also an environmental issue, political issues as well, with the Houthis in Yemen threatening to attack the city, and economic issues with Aramco, the gigantic Saudi oil company who's actually backing the project, suffering a big drop in profits this year. So yes, that's why Riyadh ultimately will have to scale it down.
It is a massively ambitious project, isn't it, Bastian? I think the Crown Prince envisaged 9 million people living in the line. Was there a little bit of misleading advertising, perhaps?
I mean, it's something that can be seen in the way the Saudis do business and sell their projects. There's always this announcement effect, so to speak. There's always a phase preceding the actual signing of contracts. This period that can be actually pretty long, in which partnerships and memorandums of understanding, these infamous MOUs, are signed with many countries, most often Western, to show a certain form of openness to the world, etc., to end up with fairly few contracts actually signed and projects actually launched in proportion to the contracts announced in the first place. When you talk to British, American, or French, Israeli investors here, that's what they tell you. But somehow, from a marketing point of view, this is a way for Saudi Arabia to make itself known in a new light. But yes, it's sometimes misleading.
And there have been high hopes, haven't there, that Israel would be able to help Saudi Arabia with this mega project. Is that still on the cards?
Yes, definitely. Although it's been cut back, it is still an ongoing project, pretty much one of the cornerstones of what the Saudis call Vision 2030. It is being built as we speak, and it saw Benjamin Netanyahu come to Saudi Arabia in the greatest secrecy in 2020, because it's a multi-billion-dollar city, a sort of Silicon Valley of the Middle East, which is being built, coincidentally or not, in the north of Saudi Arabia, 2 hours away from the Israeli border. And yes, the Saudis want Israel to participate, and Israel is actually already participating. And as some time ago, an agreement was signed between the Saudis and a solar energy company based in Herzliya in Israel. And it shows that both countries are collaborating on a number of matters under the table.
Bastian, thank you very much. Bastian B there over in Dubai.
Good evening.
Well, it's been 6 months and Israelis are still very much reeling from what happened on October 7th. Israel is a commander in the northern region, but he's been living in the south for 20 years, and he was in the kibbutz Kfar Aza on the morning of October 7th, one of the kibbutz worst hit by Hamas terrorists. Here's his story.
Brigadier Chief Israel-Hamas is a commander in the northern region, but has lived for 20 years in the south, on kibbutz Kfar Aza. He naturally feels the difficulties faced by the population of the north of the country. Displaced for 6 months, this is the case for his own family. Relocated to kibbutz Shafaim near Tel Aviv. On the morning of the Black Sabbath, he was at home in Kfar Aza.
I'm at home, ready to go out and run in the fields around the kibbutz like every Saturday. And just before going out at exactly 6:29 a.m., the rockets started. At 6:31 a.m., I saw 2 paragliders above our house, landing in the kibbutz. I then understood it was an attack and an incursion by terrorists. I shouted to my wife and children to lock themselves in the shelter because our kibbutz was under attack. I asked my son to give me a knife because I was on the extended rest period. I had left my weapon at the base, and that was a serious mistake. So I went out with a knife in my hand, and I knew I was going out to fight.
How long did you have to fight with knives until you found a weapon?
About 40 minutes.
And did you manage to kill any terrorists?
Yes, but another member of the kibbutz, whom I did not know and who was armed with a revolver, helped me neutralize them. I retrieved a weapon when I was finally able to reach the armory. 2 other members of the kibbutz security squad also managed to kill 2 other terrorists, and that allowed us to equip ourselves.
When he went out to fight, Commander Shomer was at first all alone. He received dozens of desperate calls on his phone for help from kibbutz members locked in their shelters. He managed to save some, but unfortunately, not all.
Each time I was told which family to go to.
Someone asked where the IDF was.
Because they were neighbors across the street from us, they were still alive. Then they wrote that the terrorists have returned home. This is Odelia, another neighbor I had managed to rescue.
Were you actually leaving your family to fend for themselves to save others? All these messages prove it. You were no longer defending your own family? In hindsight, was the risk worth it, given what could have happened? Was it not a dilemma?
There's no definitive answer, but I think I made the right decision, and my wife and children also think that I did the right thing. There were a lot of ifs and unknowns, because the terrorists entered my home, but I could never have forgiven myself for doing nothing and staying in the shelter. I'm really happy to have gone out to fight and save families. Unfortunately, I couldn't help them all. My brother-in-law, Yuval, may he rest in peace. He too died a hero. He fought with a knife. He managed to stab one of the Hamas men, and he told me this on the phone when he was already seriously shot in the leg. I explained to him how to make a tourniquet, but unfortunately, when I arrived there, it was already too late. I'm torn that I couldn't get there in time. I think he's a hero, like all the other civilians who were in the area of the Gaza Strip that day.
And at what time did you see the first forces arriving at kibbutz here in Kfar Aza?
At 9:47 a.m. precisely.
That's very late.
Very late. These were Golani Brigade soldiers who arrived with their Namer troop transport. They almost shot at me, and I shouted to them who I am, because I was not in uniform, but in a tracksuit. From that moment, we begin to carry out military rescue actions, house by house. We fought to eliminate as many terrorists as possible, and to save civilians.
In your opinion, why did it take the IDF so long to arrive on the scene?
Firstly, because of the element of surprise, we weren't as ready as we should have been. Everything will be investigated in due course. We weren't good enough to be able to react immediately. It took us hours. I must add that at first, we chose to fight and eliminate all the terrorists, then to take care of evacuating the families. I take this opportunity to express my deepest regret to all the inhabitants of this region for us not having been efficient enough to reach them in time. It's a huge failure. We failed. I failed. And I have since felt the full weight of this responsibility on my shoulders.
79 members of kibbutz Kfar Aza were brutally murdered on October 7th, while 18 others were kidnapped and taken hostage to Gaza. The unease continues, and difficult questions regarding the IDF's delay remain unanswered. Do you think part of the population is angry with you?
I think so. Although when I go to see the kibbutz, the families of Shefayim, I receive a lot of support and love. I know that some people are furious, and I understand them perfectly. I have nothing to blame them for. It was only at 8:20 a.m., after having fought alone 6 times against terrorists, that I made the decision to put troops on alert to the northern border to prevent Hezbollah from taking action in the same way against populations close to the border. At around 10 o'clock in the evening, I left to join my men on the northern border. I chose not to tell my family immediately, so not to worry them.
Is your family accepting of this?
No. I took my car riddled with bullets, and I left.
How are we going to defeat this bloodthirsty enemy?
Without going into unnecessary details, we have many action plans with different scenarios, and even if the situation is not the same as in Gaza, we are ready.
Another kibbutz very hard hit on October 7th was kibbutz Nir Oz, where people are preparing for a very difficult Passover Seder.
Nir Oz, the scene of unspeakable devastation in the wake of the October 7th massacre, where 1 in every 4 members of this small kibbutz were either murdered or taken hostage to Gaza. And now, 6 months later, survivors and families of hostages gathered for a pre-Passover Seder in the ruins of the once lively community, calling for the release of their loved ones.
We're standing here at the place where I used to celebrate Passover with my father, my family, and with my whole community. So many of us are still missing. I want the world to speak up clearly and loudly in a demand to let our people go.
Passover, one of Judaism's most sacred holidays to commemorate the Israelites' liberation from slavery in Egypt and exodus to freedom. And now, thousands of years later, Israelis are once again fighting for freedom.
None of the hostages are safe. All those that are alive are in constant danger. They have no time. How is it possible that we're forced to fight our own government for the right of our loved ones to return home?
133 hostages still remain in Hamas captivity, including Kafir Bibis, who turned 1 in Gaza, and his 4-year-old brother Ariel, both taken with their parents from Nir Oz.
6 months have passed, 6 months of them being there in hell. It can't be that they are going through hell just in order to be murdered in captivity. There has to be hope. We have to free them now. Hasn't the time come for the whole world to also shout for Ariel and Kfir? A shout for justice, for humanity, for an end to this nightmare. Let my family go. Let our people go.
All right, well, that brings us to the end of tonight's show. Many thanks for watching. Do stay with us here on I24 News. Kalev Ben-David will be with you next with all the very latest. Thanks for watching.
Israel is in a state of war.
Families completely gunned down in their beds. We have no idea where is she.
As our soldiers are fighting on the front lines, but the general perception is something that certainly needs to be fought as well.
Esta semana en News 24, Israel bajo ataque. News 24 en español trae el análisis y la información de los acontecimientos de la guerra, espadas de hierro.
Entrevistas exclusivas, reportes desde la zona de guerra, la reacción de los países hispanoparlantes.
News 24, el único medio en español que te mantiene informado y conectado con la comunidad latina en Israel. News 24, únicamente en I24 News.
Welcome to this special broadcast on I24 News. I'm Khaled Ben David. It is day 188 of Israel's war against Hamas. And after withdrawing most of its troops in Gaza, the IDF today renewed its operations in the Strip, primarily with a first ground incursion into the Nusrat refugee camp. At the same time, Israel unveiled its plans to boost the amount of humanitarian aid into Gaza via a rebuilt terminal at the Erez crossing in the north that will let in goods coming from the Ashdod port and truck convoys from the Gulf. And on the Iran front, concerns again mounting over the threat of the Tehran regime launching a direct strike against Israel in response to last week's airstrike that took out 7 top officials of the IRGC in Damascus. Israel's war cabinet is meeting at this moment to discuss the Iran threats. Middle East correspondent Ariel Osran has more in this report.
Tensions over an expected Iranian retaliation against Israel are soaring, and Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is throwing his own threats into the mix.
We are in challenging times. We are in the middle of the war in Gaza, which continues in full force. At the same time, we continue our non-stop efforts to return our hostages, but we are also preparing for scenarios of challenges from other arenas. We established a simple principle: whoever hurts us, we hurt them.
Netanyahu's statement at an Air Force base comes as U.S. intelligence reportedly warned Israel of an imminent Iranian attack. Tehran has vowed to retaliate for an alleged Israeli airstrike last week on its Damascus embassy complex, which killed a top IRGC general and 6 other Iranian officers. The top U.S. military commander for the Middle East, CENTCOM Chief General Michael Kurilla, arrived in Israel on Thursday to coordinate a joint response, while President Biden's Middle East envoy urged regional diplomats to pressure Iran to avoid escalating the situation.
We also want to address the Iranian threat. They're threatening to launch a significant attack on Israel. As I told Prime Minister Netanyahu, our commitment to Israel's security against these threats from Iran and its proxies is ironclad. Let me say it again, ironclad. We're going to do all we can to protect Israel's security.
Meanwhile, fear over rising tensions in the region are felt elsewhere, with German airline Lufthansa suspending flights to and from Tehran due to, quote, the current situation in the Middle East. And the Kremlin has advised Russians against travel to the region.
Мы судили, конечно же, удары по консульству Ирана. Сами удары мы осудили весьма жестко. Это нарушение всех принципов международного права. переговоры. Сейчас же очень важно всем сохранять сдержанность с тем, чтобы не привести к полной дестабилизации обстановки в регионе, который и так не блещет стабильностью и предсказуемостью.
In the meantime, an Iranian news agency reported late Wednesday that the airspace over Tehran was closed for military drills, but then retracted the report and denied its publication. And with the entire Middle East on high alert, the slightest step can add further fuel to the fire.
Well, for more, let's go to our correspondent, Balir Sladin, who is in northern Israel near the Lebanon border. And a kind of typical day of late there, Balir, is IDF airstrikes into Lebanon after Hezbollah rocket fire. But everybody is waiting to see if there's going to be a huge escalation if Iran decides to get directly involved here.
Yes, exactly. I would even say that we are sensing some sort of calm here. Like it could be definitely the calm before the storm, but currently it's strangely quiet here on the border. Like since the morning, we haven't heard the siren, not even once. And also Hezbollah took responsibility only for one launching of rockets against Israeli targets, and even that didn't actually activate the Iron Dome or activate the sirens here in the northern front. And the Israeli military as well, with their recent attacks in southern Lebanon in many villages, it hasn't also escalated any lines here today. So maybe definitely we can be calling this the calm before the storm, the Iranian response that could be expected. And now sources, American sources, telling some media outlets that they are sensing that Iranian military movements recently in the Middle East in general are linked to some sort of a preparation for an attack against Israel. That's of course coming after many reports from the American intelligence saying to Israel that the Iranian response is imminent and will be coming very soon. So the question is how this response is going to be. Is it going to be through the proxies? Is it going to be through the Iranian Revolutionary Guards? Are we going to see any launching from Iran itself? That's the big question. And maybe after the American threats in the 24 hours where they have told over again, both publicly as we've heard from Biden and Blinken today and yesterday, and also through sources that are saying that they don't rule out that they could attack Tehran or its proxies if the latter actually attacked Israel with a significant attack. So again, maybe the Americans are expecting an attack, but they are trying to minimize this attack so Israel can, with its air defense system and of course the fighter jets, can actually defend it and not causing any significant damage that will actually require some response from Israel. This is something that the Americans might be working on, and of course the many layers of defense here in the north from Israel, may be the Iron Dome or the Patriot air defense system or the fighter jets or the drones that also are on the skies. They are all on high alert to of course defend any attack against Israel from Iran or its proxies.
Right. I mean, I do think if it's an attack directly from Iran, Israel will certainly, it said it will definitely attack Iran directly, Iranian territory. The question if it's Hezbollah or one of the other proxies, of whether they're going to extend the range of their attacks beyond that Lebanon border area where you are, try aiming for the center of the country, and then we'll have to see what the Israeli response would be in that regard. Balir Sladin there in northern Israel, the threat now really to all of Israel, I think, in the coming hours. Balir, thank you for that. And we have in studio with us Ambassador Avi Pesner, the former Israeli ambassador to France and Italy, veteran diplomat, and former chairman of Keren HaYesod. Good evening. And Reserves IDF Major General Eitan Dangot, former military secretary to 3 Israeli defense ministers, and former coordinator of government activities in the Palestinian territories. And Eitan, here's the question. How will Iran respond, if they will, in the coming hours or days? And how should Israel respond in reaction to some of the scenarios I laid out?
First of all, I think that Israel is ready. And you cannot not be ready, and it was assessed and analyze, I believe, as I know it as a former officer, that we are ready to two options. One, or the first one is attacking Israel directly by missiles, by rockets, or by UAVs, more or less, and also to keep the ground. It can be done from two options. It can be done from Iran. It can be done from the proxies area, as it calls. I believe that the main one is Iraq, Syria, the meeting border on the west-north of this kind of from Iraq, or east-north from Syria. This is an area while you know about deployment and proxies there. But I think that Israel should be, as I know Israeli Air Force and the readiness, also on two things: defense, as it was discussed by your reporter, and we have a very high stages on readiness to defend the sky and the others, and the other side will be how you should react offensive. Are you going to react immediately? Immediately is in about hours. Or are you going to analyze and to wait and to see? This is question.
Well, let me be clear that the Prime Minister has made clear, and other officials, that if this is an attack launched from Iranian territory, Israel will respond to Iranian territory. But there is the other option.
Well, Kalev, both of them.
No, but let me ask you about the other option, which is an attack from USAF by Iranian proxies in Lebanon, Syria, or Iraq. That would extend to either a key military target like the Dimona reactor, or to Tel Aviv. How should Israel react to something like that if it happens?
In each case, Kalev, Israel should react immediately, offensively, with ready targets, and we have a lot of targets in these areas. Doesn't matter, Iran or Syria, Iraq. It's, meaning of a lot of magazine of targets. The question that Iran will take a lot of, I think, price for itself, whether it is going to be from Iran. It will open a very large option on reaction by Israel. And the third one can be none on both issues and can be done abroad. My own estimation that Iran, after so much speeches, statements by the leadership, the senior leadership of Iran, will try to react against Israel. And in my opinion, Iran till the last minute will calculate its activities, because the loss of price that Iran has to pay with those other countries will be under their responsibility. Secondly, about Israel, I think that in Israel should be two things: the readiness of IDF, the defensive, offensive, and of course the population, which general are under a lot of
so we have some new breaking news out of that. There are reports now that the IDF has asked the Home Front Command to prepare for the population for the possibility of an Iranian attack in the coming days. Heightens alertness, shelters, civil shelters being opened.
This is a regular readiness that should be done by the Home Front Command and by the local municipalities, each municipalities. And another thing, the readiness inside Israel by police and the others will be the most harm. No chances at all by those who will like to use these circumstances to make any kind of terrorism.
Ambassador Pazner, there's also a key point of messaging here, sending the kind of messages that could either deter Iran or at least deter it to lower the response that it would give. Have the messages been sufficient by the Prime Minister, but also by the United States, which is key?
There is a series of messages by the Minister of Defense, was the first, then the Prime Minister, and then what is most important, Kalev, the message by Joe Biden, the President of the United States, that let's make no mistake, when the chips are down, when pull comes to shove, or shoves come to pull,
push comes to shove.
Yeah, okay, that was okay. America stands firmly with Israel. In spite of the differences we may have had on the policies in Gaza, by the way, some of which have been corrected already. Biden was unequivocal. We are with Israel. We will defend Israel. We'll protect Israel. And he didn't say it, but I say it. if need be, they will participate also in offensive actions against...
Well, that would probably be the message sent by having the chief of CENTCOM, the U.S. Central Command, arrive in Israel today. Exactly. Looks like it gives the appearance of coordinating a joint response by the U.S.
It's not the first time that General Corella is here. He was here 2 or 3 weeks ago about Gaza.
Right.
About that. But his visit then was not public. This time is a public visit, which is also a warning to the Iranian. I mean, the Iranians have to know that in case of attack, our response will be a very strong response, and I think they have no doubt about it. And this is why I am not sure that if there is an attack, that it will come from Iran.
Right.
I can...
Okay, so we have the IDF spokesperson, Daniel Hagari, speaking now.
Good evening. Tonight I'm going to talk about all the reports about preparedness for an attack from Iran. First of all, it's important to say that there aren't any changes in the instructions of the Home Front Command. We are on high alert and readiness for various scenarios, and we conduct a constant situation estimate. We are prepared both on the defense and on the offense with the different capabilities of the IDF, and we are also prepared with our strategic partners. This morning, the commander of the U.S. Army CENTCOM, General Michael Eric Kurilla, came to Israel, and together with the Chief of General Staff, he had a strategic assessment of the situation in the region. Our strategic connection with the U.S. is firm and strong, as we've seen since the beginning of the war, it is measured in actions. Over the years, and now in the war, even more so, Iran has been funding, guiding and arming its proxies in Lebanon, Gaza, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen to attack the state of Israel, but not only the state of Israel, some other countries in the region as well, and not only in the region. An attack from Iran will serve as a clear indication for its intentions to escalate the situation in the Middle East. It'll mean that it has stopped hiding behind its proxies. Over the past few days, we have increased and improved our capabilities, and we can take action wherever necessary. We have a multi-tiered defense capability that has proven itself over the war with thousands of successful interceptions, and yet defense can never be hermetic, and we must continue to abide by the instructions of the Home Front Command. I repeat, as of today, there is no change in the instructions of the Home Front Command, but we must all remain alert and ready. In case of change, we will immediately provide an update, both here and in all the other platforms of the IDF spokesperson and the Home Front Command, as we've done throughout the war, immediately in every occasion. We have started a focused operation in the Netzarim corridor in the center of the Strip in order to destroy the infrastructure of the terrorists and in order to increase our hold in that area. The purpose of this operation is to cut off the capabilities or to put a stop to the Hamas capabilities to recover itself. And we are prepared for some other additional activities. This evening as well, we do not forget for one moment that 133 hostages are being held captive in Gaza, and it is our moral duty, our obligation to bring them back home as soon as possible. Questions? Good evening. Danny Ayon from Kan 11 News. Should the citizens of Israel be prepared tonight for an Iranian attack? And is the IDF preparing to attack in Iran if Iran attacks Israel from its territory? As I've said, there are no changes in the instructions of the Home Front Command, and we promise, it is our commitment to the Israeli population to give an update immediately when there are new instructions. We are monitoring the with it. We conduct a situation estimate. We've been doing it since the beginning of the war. And by the way, the state of Israel is being attacked through Iranian capabilities from Yemen, from Iraq, and from Syria, almost on a weekly basis, if not on a daily basis. And our defense, in our defensive measures, intercepts these attacks. And yet we are prepared and on high alert, both with defensive and offensive capabilities, and we will know to update the Israelis. And my second question, does the IDF intend to attack Iran if Iran attacks Israel from its own territories? We will respond with actions to every activity. Was it the right decision to target the sons of the Hamas leaders, Hania, in light of the sensitive timing? The sons of Hania are terrorists. They command terrorist activities, and they had intended in real time to execute terrorist activities and terrorist infrastructure. One of them is involved in the holding of hostages during the war. They are terrorists. That's why they were targeted. They were targeted according to all the instructions and directives. Thank you very much, and good evening.
Well, you just heard Rear Admiral Daniel Agar, the IDF spokesman, telling the public the IDF has not changed its instructions for the public, but Home Front Command is preparing for the possibility, as it should, of an Iranian retaliation. A message to calm the public, but also to keep it on alert, given all that we have spoken about. Well, let's turn now to Gaza. Now, although the IDF may have pulled out almost all of its troops that are stationed in the Strip, it does continue to operate there in specific missions. Now, the Army today saying it carried out a raid in Gaza City's Sajaya neighborhood this week that took out a Hamas training facility and eliminated several terrorists there. Now, another operation was launched overnight in the Nusrat refugee camp in central Gaza, which is aimed at Hamas terror infrastructure and personnel there. And this is the IDF's first ground operation in Nusrat since the war's beginning. Now, amid this fighting, the IDF is also stepping up its effort to increase the amount of humanitarian aid which is going into Gaza. This, of course, in the face of increasing international pressure to ease the plight of Palestinian civilians. Now, first, I just want to ask you about this Operation Nusrat, Eitan, because I can recall you saying that Nusrat, and there were reports of this, may be one of the locations that Israel will look to relocate some of those internal Palestinian refugees, if you want to call that, in Gaza from Rafah into Nusrat, which is just north of Rafah. So the question I have to ask you, is that possibly a step ahead looking toward the Rafah operation?
I think all you describe as the steps that IDF, under the Israeli cabinet war, has been started in the last 24, 48 hours, are signs that we are moving towards the continuing of the military activity. From the military point, there are 2 points we should complete on destroying Hamas battalions. In Nusrat, we didn't touch it before only by the air. The other side of the road of the Palestinian camps there, of Muassi and Burej, we already broke them. And later on, Rafah. Why does it mean and start with Nusrat? Nusrat is a very sensitive place. Just remember that Issa has been targeting inside Nusrat. In Nusrat, there is staying of the leadership of Hamas. Also some rumors about hostages that can be, this is the link on the underground between Nusrat, via Khan Yunis and
You mean through tunnels that might be underneath Nusrat?
And by now start with Nusrat is preparing the next stage of moving population from the area of west side of Rafah towards the north, very close to the sea. It can be in this area till you are coming to the block that we have from preventing going to the north part of Gaza. Secondly, it is done together with a lot of expanding dramatically the humanitarian activities. Israel declared of opening the Ashdod port.
Right, we do have some graphics, if we could bring those up, that show some of the expansion and some of the humanitarian aid.
So you will look it later. Yeah. Also, it's coming from Zikim. Officially, we open a crossing from Zikim. It means now, from my experience, Caleb, 500 double container trucks that are entering to Gaza means it's like daily activities on a quiet days. And I know it for sure from my experience. It means that Gaza is movement towards something new that Israel and Artsot Habrit and the United States discuss on it on the past. The third is the fact that what is done from the air with the fire is preparing also the area for such activities. And beside it, you have the discussion about the hostages, that if it's not coming to an end, this stage will increase its activities, the IDF, and it means we are very close to move towards Rafah step by step in fulfill the understanding between Israel and the United States.
Right, we do have some numbers. I hope we could bring those up on the screen, showing some of the increase in aid there. Let me ask you, Avi, Israel has been under a lot of pressure to take these steps. Today, the IDF talking about presenting the opening of a terminal, plans to reopen the terminal at the Erez crossing in order to bring in both the aid that would come in from Ashdod, as well as those convoys from land convoys, trucks coming from the Gulf, from the United Arab Emirates. Will this ease some of that diplomatic pressure that Israel has been facing and international criticism on this issue?
Yes, Caleb, I definitively hope so, because this was all the critical steps against Israel. Also, the threats of steps against Israel came because of the humanitarian condition in Gaza. And all what we are doing now to open up Gaza to the trucks, this is, I believe, in the best interest of Israel's image and Israel's position in the world. The fact that, as Eitan said, we had 500 trucks who entered Gaza today. This is something which will help relieve the anxiety in Europe, in the United States, and better our image and our position at a very crucial time when we need now international support because of the Iranian threat. And maybe you have remarked, Caleb, that in the last few days there is much less criticism of Israel coming from Europe on the United States. On the contrary, there is encouragement. I hope that these gestures will help restore our image.
Okay, well, we'll see that, if that will have that impact. Of course, it depends a lot what happens on the ground in Gaza in the coming days, as perhaps if we move either to a temporary ceasefire or an operation into Rafah. I'm going to ask Ambassador Avi Pazner and Eitan Dango to stay with us. We are going out for a brief break, but stay with us on this special broadcast of I-24 News. We'll be right back.
I-24 News Channel, broadcasting from Israel, with dozens of correspondents throughout the world, brings the truth from Israel to hundreds of millions of people in scores of countries.
Completely gunned down in their beds.
De la frontière qui sépare Israël. The state of emergency and war in Israel.
Bringing Israel's story to the world. I-24 News Channels. Now on Hot.
Welcome back to this special broadcast on I-24 News, day 188 of Israel's war against Hamas. And along with its fighting on the ground in Gaza and along the northern border, Israel is also contending with challenges on the diplomatic front, especially at the United Nations, where it is dealing with both a renewed bid by the Palestinian Authority to achieve recognition for statehood there as a member state, and also efforts by several countries, now including France, to get it to accept a ceasefire against Hamas. Well, for more, let's go to our senior U.S. correspondent, Mike Wagenheim, who is at the United Nations in New York. And Mike, let's break this down. Let's start with this Palestinian statehood bid, the PA, at a time when Israel is being diplomatically challenged, seeing perhaps an opportunity here. How is that progressing?
Yeah, the Palestinians are pushing a revived application for a full membership here at the United Nations. The original application put through in 2011, but never made it out of the UN Security Council's committee, which looks at new membership applications. It was a dead end back in 2011. Looks like it's going to be a dead end this time around as well. That committee on new members expected to meet at 3 o'clock Eastern time today, 10 p.m. Israel time, to look at that application once again. But Robert Wood, the deputy U.S. ambassador to the UN, told reporters earlier today that the negotiations really need to come through bilateral talks between Israel and the Palestinians in terms of a recognition of Palestinian statehood here at the United Nations. He said that's been the U.S. position for quite some time. It's not going to change anytime soon. He said pushing forward on a Security Council vote on the Palestinians' membership application here at the UN would be unfortunate. When asked outright if the U.S. would veto such a Security Council vote, he was a little bit ambiguous, but it's not difficult to figure things out right here. Meanwhile, Vasily Nebenzia, the Russian ambassador to the UN, was a little bit clearer. He said that the initial meeting of the Committee on Membership back on Monday really went nowhere. Nothing has changed since 2011. He was very direct. He said he doesn't expect anything to change based on the U.S.'s position, and essentially it's up to Algeria, a Security Council member which represents the Palestinians and the rest of the Arab world, to decide how to move forward. Keep in mind, it's been long-standing practice, Kalev. If it doesn't make it out of the committee by consensus, then it won't come up for a full Security Council vote. But it's not written in stone. There are ways around that, and Algeria or any other council member could bring it up for a full vote in front of the Security Council anyway. That's probably what's going to happen, if nothing else, to try to force the U.S. to go on the record as saying, no, we're rejecting this application.
Well, speaking of the U.S. having to veto, what about the latest efforts for the Security Council and the Security Council for a push a ceasefire on Israel, especially this French proposal?
Yeah, the French have kind of been trying to, mediate a neutral ground here between the U.S. and its adversaries on the Security Council. On one hand, stressing that the hostages need to be released, stressing that it condemns Hamas and its October 7th massacre, stressing that it condemns the sexual violence that took place not only on that day, but reportedly against hostages being held there in Gaza, and also on the other end, demanding an immediate, or in this case, the resolution being floated right now by the French, calling for an immediate, long-standing ceasefire. So trying to work both ways right now. It's still going through a number of revisions. No telling when it will come up for a vote, if it ever does.
All right, Mike Wagenheim at the UN, thank you for that. And Avi, of course, the U.S. is there to stand up for the Israel in those things. But of course, we have seen instances, a recent one, where they abstained rather than they use their veto. What about on these issues? Or is this something, a card the Biden administration could still hold over Israel?
On such an issue, Caleb, I am convinced that there will be an American veto if it comes to a vote, because that would be a change, a siege in the American policy, which always advocated, yes, a two-state solution, but coming after negotiation and an agreement between Israeli and Palestinian. And now the Palestinians are trying to circumvent this and take advantage of the hostile winds against Israel at the UN, trying to push for recognition. They will not get it. I'm not worried about that. They will not get it. The United States will stand with Israel on this one, and I am convinced that the Palestinian effort will not succeed.
All right. I want to go now to... Okay. I do want to ask you about the Palestinian issue, Eitan, issue. We're coming at the end of the Ramadan holiday, the Eid al-Fitr holiday. With a lot of concern. There still was unrest over the West Bank. We showed the operations there, but nowhere near the amount that we thought we'd see in the Palestinian public there in the West Bank and East Jerusalem.
We are 24 hours before the ending of the Eid al-Fitr, before ending of the Ramadan time. If we would sit here without the Iranian threat towards Israel, I would tell you, Caleb, that in this case, this Ramadan passed in the best that we can prepare to ourselves, because Hamas, Iran, and Hezbollah failed in their goal to burn the areas they call in the West Bank. It means the fire, what they say, plan to join that the West Bank and maybe even Israel, inside Israel, will join to the war and to the terror activities, they fail. And on the other end, I think it's a high mark to the IDF, Israeli police, and Israel Shabak, Interior Service, for the way they keep the intelligence and were very offensive inside the area, inside the places, came to the terrorists in their place, in their home. And on the other end, you see that the most population on the West Bank vote in their legs. What does it mean? They passed the Ramadan much more lower than anybody expected. They didn't join to the group that is really recognized as a terrorism. And it means, again, that since 2008, we don't see, and in my opinion, that convinced that the population in the West Bank is making its calculation different than the others. Their economy situation much more better than average civilian in Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, Jordan, etc. And they are not joining the terror, and they have enough reasons for it.
All right. Now, gentlemen, the Jewish holiday of Passover, Pesach, gets underway on April 22nd. But in kibbutz near Oz, where the October 7th massacre devastated the small community, survivors and hostage families held a pre-Passover Seder, pleading for the release of their loved ones still in Hamas captivity 6 months into the Israel-Hamas war. And Masiegel has that story.
Near Oz, the scene of unspeakable devastation in the wake of the October 7th massacre, where 1 in every 4 members of this small kibbutz were either murdered or taken hostage to Gaza. And now, 6 months later, survivors and families of hostages gathered for a pre-Passover Seder in the ruins of the once lively community, calling for the release of their loved ones.
We're standing here at the place where I used to celebrate Passover with my father, my family, and with my whole community. So many of us are still missing. I want the world to speak up clearly and loudly in a demand to let our people go.
Passover, one of Judaism's most sacred holidays to commemorate the Israelites' liberation from slavery in Egypt and exodus to freedom. And now, thousands of years later, Israelis are once again fighting for freedom.
None of the hostages are safe. All those that are alive are in constant danger. They have no time. How is it possible that we're forced to fight our own government for the right of our loved ones to return home?
133 hostages still remain in Hamas captivity, including Kafir Bibis, who turned 1 in Gaza, and his 4-year-old brother Ariel, both taken with their parents from Nir Oz.
6 months have passed, 6 months of them being there in hell. It can't be that they are going through hell just in order to be murdered in captivity. There has to be hope. We have to free them now. Hasn't the time come for the whole world to also shout for Ariel and Kfir? A shout for justice, for humanity, for an end to this nightmare. Let my family go. Let our people go.
Avi, no one knows the conditions of the remaining hostages, which is part of the outrage here. Reports in recent days raising concerns about their well-being, whether how many are alive now. The question is time running out amidst what seems to be intransigence on the part of Hamas to pull off some kind of deal at this stage?
Yes, we are still waiting for Hamas' answer on the American proposal. You know, Caleb, we went a long way. I think Israel made many gestures, even many concessions now, but it has not yet helped. We don't have an answer by Hamas, and you are absolutely right, Caleb. Every day that passes put the life of these hostages in danger. Who knows how many are alive today? We know some are dead. We don't know the numbers. Two days ago, Hamas said that they couldn't find 40 hostages alive, meeting the humanitarian conditions.
Meeting the humanitarian. I just want to clarify that is the remaining women, which is
elderly people and sick
right,
people.
which is more than 40. So
yeah, exactly. They said they couldn't find them, so maybe they were killed there. We don't know. So we don't have to forget. Together today, everybody is dealing with the Iranian issue. We don't have to forget it is another big issue, the hostages, and try and push for their liberation, because with each day that passes, it makes their life more dangerous.
That's the card really that Hamas holds. The question is at what point, even would be on the eve of a Rafah invasion, that they might be willing to make a deal, or you think at this point their attitude has shown that they're willing, unfortunately, to sacrifice the lives of the hostages and their own in a bitter finish?
We are on a junction that moves us from the United States plan, and they failed in this plan to achieve.
But we don't know 100% yet that they failed.
Okay, I tell you what I mean. I mean to achieve such kind of agreement in the Eid al-Fitr. That was the plan.
Right, during the Ramadan
and the Ramadan with agreement. What I mean it's now that we are moving in this junction to the continuing of this plan, because from Israel point of view, and I'm convinced that the United States support it, to continue in the next way, how to have the deal. And to have the deal on the day after the Ramadan is to do what IDF is start to do in the military way, to continue efforts and pressure by the United States on Qatar, on Hamas. And the third, in my opinion, Hamas is waiting to see what will be between Israel and Iran. All the time Hamas get a backwind. Once before now in this time, in the present, they have the backwind from the delegitimation towards Israel concerning the humanitarian issue. Now they are moving to the Tehran threat towards Israel to see what's going, and I'm sure both sides are coordinated. One of the silence from Hamas is the order from Tehran, wait.
Right. Let me ask you, there was a question asked to the IDF spokesperson, Daniel Hagari, about the strike that took out the three sons of Ismail Haniyeh, who weren't part of the Hamas military operatives. Ismail Haniyeh himself said that the death of his sons will have no bearing on the hostage negotiations. But you did hear that question being asked to Admiral Hagari just this evening.
I think it's a very sensitive question. First of all, there is no doubt that those three sons are terrorists. And we have all the evidence, of course, the intelligence. The second issue was, even it was in the automatic magazine of the IDF, identify, recognize those terrorists.
Right, I do want to say the IDF did say that they were in the process of carrying out a terror attack, and that was why they were hit, not because they were Haniyeh's sons.
I would like to say that when you see the name Haniyeh or Daf or Sinwar, you have to pass it to a superior level.
Both of you took from me what I'm meaning on the second answer of my...
But Avi's asking...
on the other hand, I said that you have to be very sensitive, of course, and especially in this timing that we are looking for this kind of agreement, it should be discussed with the circle of the senior officers in the IDF and with the war cabinet whether go or no go.
Right, I agree with you.
All right, and finally, I do want to ask you, Avi. The U.S., Israel, the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he's going to have to make some difficult decisions in the day ahead. He's pushed ahead with the humanitarian thing. He's gone, in some ways, against some of the far-right elements in his cabinet. How certain can he be moving forward that he'll have the latitude to make some of these crucial decisions?
Yeah, you know, all his move on humanitarian aid was against the advice of Ben Gvir and Smotrich. They did not agree. He shoved it down their throat. I mean, he made already some difficult decision after his very difficult conversation with President Biden. He had to make tough decisions, and he made them.
And he made them. He'll have many. No, I'm afraid.
One sentence. I think the black dream of Bibi Netanyahu was to have such a war while you have in your two sides Smotrich and Ben Gvir.
All right, well, unfortunately, that is the case that he's having to deal with. Ambassador Avi Pesnai Tandango, thank you for joining us. Now, IDF forces in Gaza are fighting under the difficult conditions of urban warfare, where being able to use their firearms quickly and accurately means the difference between emerging from a firefight alive or dead. Now the troops there can rely on a new smart gun developed by Israel weapons industry that uses a mini computer system to keep their shots on target. Matthias Inbar, defense correspondent for our French channel, has that story.
A mini computer incorporated into a weapon. The future isn't tomorrow. It's very real. The Israeli company IWI has introduced a fourth firing mode on the trigger, the Arbel.
The system doesn't just fire when it wants. It fires because I aim and pull the trigger. I could continue like stopping the shooting.
It took us 9 years to achieve an optimal result of the system for small arms and submachine guns. We therefore incorporated a computer which will help the shooter to be more precise using an electric trigger and a battery. The system is already operational, already tested by several armies around the world.
And it works at all distances, in all positions. The key word here is not the famous adage, one shot, one hit, but rather aim well, shoot once, the rest entrusted to this mini computer.
We did a study of the behaviors of shooters who already have experience. When the shooter aims at a moving target, the system will understand, analyze, and give a response to a shot in motion and not as if the target was static. The objective here is to fire a large number of bullets in a short period of time. He fired 5 bullets in less than a second, and all 5 were on target. This is what we call a fatal shot.
The proof in pictures with the Arbel. The more our camera moves in, the better we understand the ease with which the system allowed the shooter to aim and hit. On the left, the automatic fire of an experienced shooter. Some bullets hit the target. On the right, the same shooter with Arbel. All 10 bullets are on target.
It is the first weapon in the world, the first, that transforms a sniper rifle. You turn any shooter into a sniper. We said, what is missing? Well, thanks to this mini processor, we managed to get the best out of any shooter. We have certainly added 900 grams to the weight of the weapon, but we have considerably reduced the number of bullets fired. 500 in a Negev Arbel submachine gun, double for the same weapon without the system. Less of ammunition, it's less weight.
Crucial in modern urban warfare, like the one currently being carried out by Israeli army forces in Gaza.
Let's take the example of a force ambushed in Gaza or in position to this target, for example. The soldiers have to be much more precise, and since they will manage to hit the targets, the Arbel system addresses many problems in this regard on the battlefield.
Let's have a look at the real conditions. This Negev machine gun transforms into a precision weapon. Most bullets hit within a few dozen meters. And then this shot. The drone is hit from the third bullet. The Arbel engineers are certain of it. Once operational, the microprocessor will no longer have any limits.
Now, the brothers Daniel and Nasia Sharabi are both victims of the Nova Music Festival attack and heroes from it. During the assault on October 7th, the Sharabis managed to save dozens of lives by providing cover fire with a rifle they got from a tank that arrived on the scene. They've been speaking about their experiences both here and abroad, but when they arrived at the UK's Manchester airport 2 weeks ago, the reception they received from security guards there was, well, let's say less than welcoming. Here's a bit of a clip of that incident that went viral.
The checks we need to conduct, okay? Nobody's saying that. Nobody has said that once. So knock the attitude off. We've made the decision and you're coming in. So just let us do the checks we need to do and keep quiet. Look at me. Okay, you clear with that? Good. We're the bosses, not you, all right?
And we're joined in studio now by Nasia and Daniel Sharabi. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. You deserve better than what you got there. Let me just ask you, start, Nasia, just briefly describe what happened there at the Nova Music Festival with you and your brother.
So we arrived to the Nova Music, 4 friends in my car. And like everyone, we start to hanging out in the holiday. Everyone enjoying beautiful face until 6:30, and then the racket start. After 1 hour that we don't understand what's happening, I start to run to my car to try to bring him and take my brother and everyone else. And then I stuck in the gate, so I decided to go in without the car. I start running and I'm hearing a shooting from a Kalach, and I realized that this is not IDF. And minutes after, my brother called me and said to me that everyone gets shot on the road and we have to come to him. And me and my cousin, Shaul Yoshua, starting to run into Daniel on the road. And we arrived, we saw everyone wounded on the floor, all the cars without anyone, everyone just running. And everyone confused. And after a few minutes, we hear a friend of Daniel yelling to us, we need a medical, we need a medic. And then Daniel just running, and we running after him, and we saw a girl that get shot. We start to evacuate the door and start to running on our life, almost hour, and we get shot. Running between the bodies, and then we get RPG and our friend get kidnapped. We move forward, so after a while we saw Israeli tank, just the soldiers murder, and just one of them make it alive and he ran away. So we decided to go in, we jump in, I saw dead body inside.
In the tank?
Soldier, yeah. So I took his rifle. Daniel go out and start to take care of the people. He was the medic, and I just bring the weapon and other stuff out, and we start to fight almost 6 hours. We get 2 hit by RPG in the middle. I get shrapnels, Daniel, basically everyone. And after 6 hours, the reserve army arrived to us, and
right. And during that time, people credit you for saving dozens of lives for the fighting that you did on your own there. Let me ask you, Daniel, about going to the United Kingdom, because you've been speaking about the experience. You have a non-profit. You went there on the basis of that. Tell us about that and what you experienced there at the Manchester airport.
Basically, because the anti-Semitism and all around the world, and about our healing and about our organization, we go and speak and share our story all around the world. We spend 4 months in the US. We doesn't want to come to England because we know what is the situation about the anti-Semitism. But the rabbi convinced us for a few times, and we say yes, let's go for it. It's Manchester, it's not London.
Right.
It's okay, it's better. And when we arrived to the airport, everything was okay till Neria gave him the passport, the Israeli passport, and he asked them, what is your religious? Because he thought that we are Muslim because we're black. And Neria say we are Jewish, and he just changed his attitude and start to act like we're not human, like he hit the Jewish and he hit the Israelis. He put us on the side for 2 hours, and after an hour and a half, someone come and start to interrogate us and start to ask a lot of questions about when you was in the army, how long you was in the army, what you did in your life, and a lot of aggressive and very, very not nicely.
Right, and and when you were done, the guard said, right, they said something. They had to make sure. He told you. Tell us what he told you.
When he understands he doesn't have nothing about us and he have to let us in, he just say, I just want to make sure that you're not going to do here what you're doing in Gaza.
You're not going to do what you're not going to in the UK. You're not going to do what you're doing in Gaza.
What you're doing in Gaza because a soldier. And after a second, the girl beside to him say, basically, we don't like what you do. What do you come to do here? To speak and share a story about October 7. And then I realized this is anti-Semitism in the full way that can happen. So I open my camera undercover. I have to take a video, and I catch him speak very dirty and very not nicely. This is not how people in the gate of the country are supposed to speak and talk.
For sure.
Not to us if we are not terrorists.
All right. I should note I think the Manchester Jewish community did file a complaint on your behalf about the treatment you received there at the airport.
Yes, but there is no response yet.
Okay.
They say that they're taking care of it.
The minister of England say something about the interrogate, but nothing happened, and nothing that we saw.
Okay. Before we let you go, Daniel, the name of your nonprofit.
Future for the Survivor and the Wounded. We guide in victim of terror. We give him a treatment, EMDR. And we doing retreat for the survivor of the Nova. We have for the relative that people that die. It's a few hundred survivors. The next time is going to be next week. From the 18th till 20, 3 days of healing, of meditation, of gathering together.
Right. Neri and Daniel Sharabi, heroes of the Nova Music Festival, and I have to say heroes of the